welcome back. Thanks so much for tuning in to attend our own panel today, Innovation Nations. We have Ori and Dina here to answer any of your questions. I don't see any questions so far. So let me start off by asking actually a question for both of you. So one of the themes that we had in the cyber conference was how to help governments, how to basically create the right vehicle to exchange views with government, especially in the tech space. If you have one quick advice on how to form that kind of vehicle, how it should be shaped, and what would be the best outcome. I will start by Dina, please.
I would ask you to elaborate a little bit more on the question. When you say a vehicle, explain a little more.
A forum, a group, a dialogue between private sector, technologists, and governments.
I feel like that already exists in many forms. If you're looking for something more specific, honestly, I think what might be more interesting is to see policymakers across the region actually group together and think about what they can do collaboratively to unleash some of the potential that's already been seen. But I feel like there's so many forums and conferences, roundtables, sessions with policymakers, I think in varying different countries and even I would say regionally to an extent, but I don't think there's a concentrated effort to bring policymakers specifically together to sit at a table with those who are on the innovation side to really think together. And I say regional only because I think more and more we're seeing a technology move cross-border, and we want to see more of that.
Thank you, Dina. Ori?
Yeah, I agree with what Dina is saying. The only recommendation I'd give is policymakers should see what are the seeds, what are the essence that has to be in the area in order for the innovation to spring up. And I think that the key, as you heard in the session we had before, is to have some risk capital available, whether it's government funded or not, to get the universities and the talent to come together and encourage them, because a lot of the young entrepreneurs are bringing the innovation us old people would not dare think of. And the third is the support, the community, the sharing of ideas and the ability to do it. I don't know that governments can force or can kind of make it happen, but they need to be open to create the environment, the fertile environment for which innovation can spring from.
Thank you, Ori. One of the other questions that we usually get asked for entrepreneurs in the Middle East to pivot to much more global scale, what kind of support they need from their own governments? If this is basically the way to go about it, I'm not sure, but this is a question that was asked by a friend, entrepreneur. He's working in a tech-related industry, and he was asking, what should we ask the government to do for us to scale up in a global scale instead of just focusing on Egypt or the rest of the Middle East?
It's an interesting question. You know, I often, if you're here in the United States and you think about how Israel helps its entrepreneurs, it's very interesting the way that they connect their local entrepreneurs globally, not just to investors, but to other like-minded entrepreneurs for mentorship, for coaching. They tap them into other networks. They help find ways for them to spend time in ecosystems like Silicon Valley. and I was interestingly in a roundtable discussion this morning with the American Chamber in Egypt about how they could build a bridge between Egypt and Silicon Valley. And I say this not saying that what we should be doing as in the Middle East is repeating or trying to create another Silicon Valley. But I do think we should be finding ways to build bridges and connect between what is happening in our own ecosystems and other ecosystems around the world in very strategic ecosystems that are really good at scaling innovation to a global scale, whether that be Silicon Valley, whether that be Boston, whether that be Austin, in some ways London, and even what we're seeing in China today. I think that's a big role that our governments can play that they're not yet playing.
Ori?
I fully agree. The government should not be in the way. That's the best help that they can bring. In the early stages of a company, as I said, there are some Office of Technology and others that can help with seed funding. So if a country doesn't have that, they should be able to afford it. But the third is, again, creating the environment of collaboration. Some ideas that I would suggest is you have embassies all over the world, and if a very famous tech person comes to visit your country, create a session either in their embassy or in a university or somewhere that allows the young generation to come talk, learn, connect, network, be influenced or be inspired sometimes, because all those interactions at the end of the day create the movement. It's not a single person and a single event. It's a constant kind of melting pot that creates it. So the more the government can do to just bring the right minds together and say it's okay to do and it's encouraged, I think that would help a lot.
Thank you, Ori. I believe that there was a question that Dina just answered. And again, let me repeat it for our attendees. So we had an anonymous question asking, how can high-tech nations bridge the gaps for more vulnerable citizens, as well as non-citizens and migrant workers? Dina's response was that it requires a lot more focused attention on inclusive innovation as adopted framework. Amazing answer, can I agree more? Ori, do you have remarks to add here?
No, I think that pretty much captures it. There's so many things we could do and should do. But I agree, we need to have more focused attention on bringing everybody into the conversation, and by design, it will fall out of it. It will have more inclusivity.
Great. We have five minutes to end the conversation. So I want to ask you, what was the question that you expected to be asked, and what would be your answer to it?
Okay, and I do see we have one more question. So again, Dina, I'm going to let you see if you want to take that first. It's in the Q&A tab as opposed to in the chat.
Yep, I see that question. The question is, how does the trend of isolationism in some developed countries impact global innovation, if at all? Are private tech companies immune to this?
I feel like I want the person to be a little bit more elaborate who asked this question. When they say isolationism, do they mean like the UK and Brexit, or do they mean like kind of Trump-like America? What are they referring to?
Both of them. It can capture Boris Johnson populism in Europe, Trump-esque Trump populism in the United States, if this will have an impact on the tech landscape.
I mean, if you look at what happened in the United States, I think a big part of the tech industry here really revolted against that type of isolationary thinking, right? I think a lot of, there is a tendency now for governments to think more along these isolationary terms, but I think technology has proven again and again to kind of win that battle. And I don't think that you can scale otherwise. But I don't know, I'd love for Ori to take that on.
Yeah, I'll answer the latter. I agree with Dina that specifying the question mark would help. So I'll answer it in the Trump-esque flavor of this. And I think the answer is no. you know how Victor Hugo said that there's no army in the world that can withstand an idea that its time has come. If technology that is so flat is desired and needed, people will find a way to get it. I don't know that any leader or any policy can now control it, except if you live in a country that actually controls your internet traffic in and out. Then one again, without mentioning specific countries, one might say, yeah, you simply can't get to it. But I don't know that any policy today is not allowing a tech company to sprawl out if indeed their idea is at the right place and at the right time.
It looks like another question popped up. I think it's a little too early to tell whether or not COVID will lead to greater cooperation in the tech world, where diplomacy might be difficult. I would tend to say that collaboration around anything that has an economic lens tends to beat diplomacy any day. But I think it's still a little too early to tell. I think we're already seeing a lot more collaboration on the economic side across the region that was in some ways born during COVID and some pre-COVID. I think technology by its very nature, it's just an easier space to allow for collaboration, especially as it's more and more becoming a lot more open source and easy to access. But I think it's just too early to tell whether that will lead to a lot more collaboration and cooperation in the region.
Ori? I agree, and I do want to reiterate, COVID or no COVID, technology allows people to simply do things that they couldn't do before, where you couldn't travel or you didn't have the budget to travel. Look at this meeting we're in right now. Look at how many people are joining it from all over the world with very simple technology that we all have either in our pocket as a phone or with a PC. So I do think this goes beyond regional. It's actually worldwide. We can do today things that involve greater cooperation in ways that we couldn't even imagine 20 years ago. I'll give one example for the engineers in the room. If you think about what GitHub does for the developer environment, it democratized code. You can be in Venezuela, in Japan, in Egypt, anywhere in the world, get to the same exact library as the best engineers in Silicon Valley and start hitting the same servers. Like, if that is not flattening the world or democratizing the ability for anybody to use it, I don't know what is. So it's just a matter of finding the right spirit and learning the basics to get into the community. And then I don't know that your government can hold you back any more than anywhere else in the world.
A great ending to our today's panel. Dina Sharif, or Izan, thanks so much for having the time for us today. I personally learned from your great remarks on this issue. I really appreciate that. And we hope to engage with you further in the future. For our attendees, thank you so much for tuning in today. We hope to see you for the rest of the panels that we have at the Cyber program.